Testing. All right. This is the first recording. Hey, you're listening to episode number 1 of Obsessive Creative. I'm your host, Luke Cleland, and you can stay up to date with all things obsessive and creative by following me on Instagram at LukeWTCleland. Let's get into the show. Welcome to the first ever episode of Obsessive Creative. As you can tell, I'm a little excited about this, as a procrastinator would be. Maybe one procrastinator to another procrastinator. You know how good it feels when you finally check something off your list that has been sitting on that bottom of the piece of paper for months and months and months, and then you finally do it and you cross it off. This is my crossing off. Today, it's not going to be the normal podcast format that we're going to be having in the future, but today I thought I'd just kind of lay the idea out for you of what is Obsessive Creative, what is this podcast, and see if that floats your boat in the sea of things called podcasts. Then float along with me. This is getting weird already. So about 2 years ago, I felt like there was something missing in my work. And I work as a freelance photographer, and it's not like it was missing all the time, but I felt like I was losing something over time. I couldn't quite figure out what that was. And it wasn't about until a year later, I had just gotten married and I was talking to my wife about all this, and she pointed it out exactly. And when she said it to me, I was like, whoa, you're totally right. So before I explain what was missing, we need to go back a little bit. My first memory of kind of exploring creativity was I was really young. I don't remember how young I was, but it doesn't really matter. I want to say 9, 10, 7, something around there. And I'd go up to my parents' room, crawl under their bed, and that's where my dad would store his camera. And I would pull out this black Canon carrying case for his film camera, and it held his camera and all these lenses, and I would take these out, put them on, and I would just love to look through the lenses on my dad's camera. It never really crossed my mind to actually take photos back then. I just wanted to look through the lenses. I just wanted to try different lenses, look through them, see what would happen if I did all these things. And that kind of started this obsession with seeing the world a different way. Fast forward like 10 years. I had just finished design school and I'd started taking on photography jobs, and here I found myself being a full-time photographer. And I didn't even realize that was a job. I didn't even know people would pay you, actually give you money to take photos of something that I would do for free, and I had been doing for free for years, and then I discovered that people would pay you to take photos, which was crazy. And maybe some of you find yourself in that situation. You find yourself that people are paying you to do something that you almost have to do anyways in your life. You have to. It's just this thing that you have no option but to do the thing that you love to do. And so right around that time when I had first started photography, I lived in this little duplex. It's called 23 Balsam. And it was kind of my first apartment. I was living on my own. And after a couple weeks of living there, I managed to convince one of my best friends to move in next door to apartment B. I was in A, he was in B, and him and his wife are artists, and it was an incredible time because we spent all of our extra time. We would, work during the days and then come in the evenings, and we spent all of our extra time, our money. We would be planning, creating, brainstorming, throwing out ideas. The three of us would sit around, eat ice cream, and talk about all of our little crazy creative plans we had going up. So we would conjure these creative empires all in our mind, all somewhat delusional, but we build these things in our minds, and we love talking about it. Like, oh, what if you did this to this? And then what if you brought in this person, you did this? And I loved it. It inspired me. It filled me up. It's what I loved most about being in school for design. I loved the feedback, the idea. I loved the criticism, the stories about locking your keys in your cars and messing up your project the night before you had to do it and you had to redo it. It was that fuel that would keep me so ready to create, hearing what other people were doing, listening to how hard it was, and hearing about people's creative vision and the struggle to produce it was inspiring for me. It was this little world in that apartment back at 23 Balsam with my two other friends where creativity ran free. And the problem was I had this thing that I loved to do and I would do it for free. And people started to pay me for it, which was amazing. The problem was when I started to only focus on the business and my creativity, the thing that I couldn't help but do, the thing that was almost obsessive in me that I couldn't help but to create and take photos and like make ideas. That all started to become secondary to the hustle, to the growing, to the business, to the revenue, to all of that. I went from playing and enjoying in creativity to being surrounded by stats, growth, hacks, the workshops, by doing. But for me, I never found the recharge, that inspiration. I found some inspirational podcasts or articles, but at the end, they always ended up to be about the next trick to grow your Instagram, to grow this, to get more of this, which is all amazing. That is good. And I have grown my own business so much of that. However, when you're looking at the long-term creative field, the creative game, being able to do this for your whole life, I realized that I was feeding the business side and I forgot to feed the creative side. Because for me, my gas tank on creativity started to get lower and lower. And that's kind of essential when your job requires you to be creative and you're getting tired of it and you're feeling burnt out on being a creative professional. And so back to that conversation, I was sitting in our apartment with my wife and I was telling her all this stuff. I was telling her about my creative desires and who I am as an artist, and I feel like an artist, but I'm doing this or I'm not doing this. And if you're an artist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe for me, it always happens at the same time of year. And this kind of tornado. But the problem for me is that I was struggling to feel like the person that I've always been. And that became really difficult. And then she's like, Luke, you really need to have a better creative community. You used to have like all this creative community and you used to like put so much effort into like, you know, talking to people and like going to like museums and reading about old dead artists and all of this stuff. And she said, and you just don't do that anymore. You're so focused on like the growth that you've forgotten about the creative community that fills you up so much. And boom, like I was like, you're totally right. I'd been moving away from community, whether those are people in your city, online, or even just the art community, dead or alive. And I was moving towards this individual business growth. But I realized that my number one creative building up was community, was seeing, hearing about, and learning from the creatives around me. Sure, it's something that's lots of people say, right? Like, oh, you got to build community. You got to get the community around you. And I'm sure I've said it a lot of times, but I never fully realized it until how much human relationships and the human experience in creativity plays a huge role for me. Those that are fighting the similar battles that you're fighting, that are winning the similar races, push you to be a better creative. I've been told so much that competition is where it's at, that followers are king, that metrics are the gold, but it's not. This is what I want Obsessive Creative to be. A place of creative refuge, a place of recharge and inspiration. No stress and pressure about the selling, or the growth. It's going to be business free. I want this to be art class. Like, did you ever have those elementary art classes where ours was always on Friday afternoon? It was the thing that I looked forward to every single week. But we would have these afternoon art classes, and it would always, maybe it was because it was like the last thing in the week, end of the day. So it'd be like Friday afternoon, last period, you do art class. And it would be like they'd hand you like some wire, glue, colored paper, and it was like Thanksgiving time, and you had to just like make a turkey and stick it on a plate or something for your mom. And it was amazing. It was freestyle, open. You didn't have to post. You had no article to write. You had fun creating, talking, throwing ideas, sitting around. And you know what I'm talking about? When you meet someone in your industry and you sit down and you're like, oh, no way, you're a wedding photographer too? Like, let's swap stories. Let's talk. Like, you could talk about like ideas and gear and techniques and trying all these stuff that you're doing with no judgment because people understand where you're coming from. I want this to be a place of conversation, of ideas, a place where we push each other to tend to that little creative garden down in there. That's kind of getting weird, but the little creative garden that you have. And for a moment, you forget about all the pressing, important, necessary evils of life, and you get to play again. Do you know those people? Do you know those people in your life that when you have this I have this idea and I need to tell you about it, and you tell them, you like pour your heart out, and then they just they stare, a couple blinks, and then there's others that their eyes widen and their first words are like, oh, I love it so much, like, how could I help, or what if you added this, or like, what if you did this, or like simply, or just like encouraging you to keep going and to keep trying it. And you know the people in your life that if you said this to anyone else except for them, like, it would be the craziest idea. Like, what are you thinking? But to these people, it makes total sense. And not only does it make total sense, they can kind of imagine it themselves. It's like you're both looking at this same thing that no one can see. This idea. And it's like a force you can't stop. It's like an obsession almost. It's this obsession to be creative. I think every human is created to have in their DNA this obsessiveness to create invisible things. And it shows itself in different ways, and it's stronger in others, and it doesn't always show itself through maybe paint or film, but you know who you are. The always searching, the innovating, the curious, the adventurous, no, I can't just do it like this. It's got to be better. I want this to be 23 Balsam for all of us, where ideas ran free. I want this to be art school, where we chat, rant, dream, and be inspired. A place to play with ideas, to hear about new ones, and to be re-energized with creativity. Because you can't help it. You can't stop being one of us. Welcome to Obsessive Creative. All right, thank you so much for listening this week. I really appreciate it. This was kind of just like a blah of ideas, But I'd love for you, if this even sparked a little bit of interest, to go ahead and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I can't wait to talk to you next week. Till then, happy creating.